Have you ever asked yourself what it means to truly be present for the people you love? Imagine building an empire, leading thousands, and yet failing to calm the two small voices that matter most under your own roof. Nathaniel Price, a billionaire with everything money could buy, faced that reality when his twins burned through 29 nannies in a single month. Their laughter had turned to chaos, their home into a fortress of loneliness. And then came a choice, another nanny to fail, or someone who would dare to step into the storm when Selena Ward walked through the door. She didn't just manage the boys, she changed the air itself. But here's the question: if you were Nathaniel, would you recognize the difference in time? Would you risk opening your heart when the world told you to stay armored? This story isn't about wealth or status. It's about the fragile places inside every family and the strength it takes to rebuild them. So ask yourself, what would you have done? Stay with us, and let's step into a journey that may just echo your own. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss a single chapter of this story. The marble floors of the Price estate gleamed like a mirror, but they only reflected emptiness. Nathaniel Price, billionaire CEO of Price Global Holdings, stood in the cavernous foyer and loosened the knot of his silk tie. He was exhausted in a way no quarterly report, no hostile takeover, no late-night negotiation had ever managed to make him. At 51, he was a man who had fought his way from poverty in Baltimore to the penthouses of Manhattan. A man whose name carried weight in every boardroom he entered. Yet in this mansion, his power meant nothing. Here, he was not the visionary who built empires. Here, he was just a single father who had fired or been abandoned by 29 nannies in less than a month. The echoes of childish laughter thundered down the grand staircase. Not the laughter of innocence, but of mischief of small boys plotting their next rebellion. Caleb and Mason, his 8-year-old twins, had become his fiercest opponents. He remembered his wife Vivian's last words before she stormed out of this house 2 years ago. "I can't mother those monsters. Nathaniel, you deal with them." She had left with her designer bags, her cold perfume lingering in the air, and she never looked back. Since then, the mansion had grown darker with every passing day, until even the chandelier's 1,000 crystals couldn't bring warmth. Nathaniel walked toward his study, his polished shoes tapping against the marble. He wanted nothing more than silence a moment to rest his head, to drink a glass of bourbon, to forget that despite his billions, he was utterly powerless where it mattered most. But silence was a stranger in this house. A crash echoed from the dining hall, followed by a triumphant cheer. He winced, probably another nanny's suitcase rolling out the door, probably number 29, defeated like all the others. And sure enough, as he passed the hall, he saw a figure hurrying toward the exit. A young woman, hair frazzled, apron stained with syrup, muttering curses under her breath. She didn't even glance back. She simply slammed the door and was gone. Nathaniel closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Another one. Another failed attempt at stability. He entered his study, where shelves of leather-bound books and signed contracts towered like monuments to his success. But even here, surrounded by reminders of his triumphs, he felt only failure. He lowered himself into the leather chair behind his oak desk and stared at the darkened window. How did it come to this, he wondered. How can I command thousands of employees but not 2 children? He reached for his phone, scrolling through emails, meetings in Dubai, a partnership in Tokyo. Numbers, numbers, numbers. All meaningless in the face of the truth. Caleb and Mason were slipping further away from him every day. A sound broke his thoughts, a shriek of laughter, followed by running footsteps. The door burst open, and the twins appeared, their blonde hair damp with sweat, their cheeks flushed with mischief. Caleb held a paintbrush dripping with blue, Mason a handful of glitter. "Nanny's gone," Caleb shouted. "We won," Mason added, throwing glitter into the air like confetti. Nathaniel slammed his phone onto the desk. "Enough," he barked, his voice sharper than he intended. The boys froze, eyes wide. For a moment, he thought maybe they would listen. But then Mason smirked, and Caleb burst into giggles, and they bolted back out the door, leaving a trail of glitter behind them. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, pressing a hand to his temple. His chest ached, not with anger but with something heavier. Guilt. He had been absent too long at conferences, at dinners, on planes that circled the world. He told himself it was for them, to secure their future. But children didn't understand the stock options or balance sheets. They understood presence. They understood love, and he had not been present. From the corner of his study, Maggie Lopez, the housekeeper who had served his family for decades, spoke gently. "Sir, they don't hate you. They just want to be seen." Nathaniel looked at her, his jaw tight. They drove off 29 nannies. Maggie, 29. They don't want to be seen. They want to destroy. Her lined face softened, her accent wrapping her words in warmth. Children test the world because they feel it's forgotten them. You can buy them anything, but you can't buy what they really need. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Her words struck too close to the truth he had buried beneath contracts and power. The mansion fell quiet for a moment, save for the faint drip of paint from Caleb's brush onto the marble floor. Nathaniel stared at the ceiling, at the chandelier glistening above, fractured light scattering across the walls like broken glass. He felt broken, too. Tomorrow, he would have to find Nanny number 30, another stranger to throw into the chaos, another doomed experiment. He told himself it didn't matter that his role was to provide, not to nurture, but deep down, in the part of him he never showed to the world. He longed for peace, for laughter that wasn't sharp with defiance, for love that wasn't conditional or transactional. But peace felt impossible. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, Nathaniel Price, the man who could negotiate billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat, felt his own tears threatening to fall. Somewhere upstairs, his sons laughed again, and Nathaniel realized he no longer knew whether that laughter was a blessing or a curse. Tomorrow would bring someone new. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would bring the beginning of something different. Morning came with a pale ribbon of light stretching over the treetops of Greenwich, glazing the long driveway and the brass lion knockers on the front doors. Nathaniel Price stood in the kitchen in a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled once, a mug of black coffee warming his hands. He watched the steam rise and tried to make a plan that felt human, not corporate. Meetings could be sequenced, sons could not. Maggie Lopez set a plate of scrambled eggs on the island. She had added chives and a generous shake of pepper, the way Nathaniel liked when he remembered to eat. "You cannot keep interviewing random nannies off a list," she said calmly. "You need someone who will not scare when the boys roar. They do more than roar." Nathaniel muttered. Yesterday they painted the dining chairs blue and poured glitter into the vents. It snowed inside my study. Maggie's mouth tilted in a half-smile. Then you need someone who knows how to let it snow without freezing. She wiped her hands on a towel and nodded toward the hallway. Your 9 o'clock just arrived. He frowned. My what? The front door opened softly. A woman stepped in, spoke with the security guard in a low, even tone, and offered her ID and references without being asked. She moved with the quiet economy of someone who had learned to be noticed only when necessary. She wore a navy dress under a light trench, sneakers laced clean. Her hair was pulled back, not severe, just neat. When she entered the kitchen, the morning light framed her like a hush. "Good morning, Mr. Price," she said. Her voice carried a surprising warmth, a note of steadiness that settled the room. "I'm Selina Ward. I know I wasn't on your short list. Maggie invited me to meet you." Maggie lifted both palms, and "it was me" gesture. "I called her last night, old friend of a friend." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "We've had 29 nannies in 4 weeks. Most didn't last a day. Why do you think you'll be different, Ms. Ward? Because I don't plan to be their warden," Selina said simply. "I plan to be a bridge." She laid a leather portfolio on the island. Inside were letters of reference from families and 2 school principals, a certificate in child development, and a copy of her CPR and first aid credentials. At the back, tucked in a sleeve, sat a worn Polaroid of a much younger Selina reading to 3 children on a church stoop. The edges were frayed. Nathaniel glanced at the Polaroid before catching himself. "And what do you charge for building bridges?" "A fair wage," she said, "and 1 condition, breakfast with the boys." Today, he blinked. Today, before he could object, 2 sets of feet thundered across the hallway. Caleb and Mason burst into the kitchen wearing T-shirts with astronauts on the front and 1 sock each. They were mid-argument about whose Lego rocket deserved a launch. Then they saw Selina and fell quiet. The silence had weight. "Hi there," she said, like she was greeting neighbors at a picnic. "I'm Selina. I was told astronauts live here. Is that true?" "We are not astronauts," Mason answered. "Suspicious. We are engineers. Engineers build the ship. Astronauts just ride it." Selina nodded as if briefed by NASA. "Then I brought the wrong fuel." She opened her tote and pulled out 3 wooden spoons, a small whisk, and a bag of pancake mix. "Engineers need breakfast fuel. Will you help me test a prototype? We need 1 cup of milk, 2 eggs, and teamwork." Caleb crossed his arms. "Why should we? Because I can flip a pancake without splashing a single drop of batter," she said. "And if you can beat me, you get to name the first rocket of the day." A challenge changed the air pressure. Mason shot a glance at Caleb that said we should at least see. Nathaniel, astonished, found himself stepping back, watching an invisible current shift from chaos to curiosity. Maggie slid bowls onto the counter and retreated to the pantry with a slip of a smile. Selina washed her hands. Then she did not tell the boys what to do. She asked, "Caleb, will you measure 1 cup of milk, Mason? Will you crack the eggs into this bowl if shells drop in? No panic. We can rescue them. Engineers fix things." No one had spoken to them like that in a long time, not with respect for their competence. Caleb poured too fast. Milk sloshed over the rim. Selina caught the cup with her palm, a quick move, then nodded at the mess. "See rescue." She slid a clean towel. "You're allowed to spill in this kitchen as long as you also learn." Mason cracked the first egg and winced at the trembly yolk. Gross. He breathed, delighted and horrified. He cracked the second with too much enthusiasm. Shells fell. Selina held the bowl steady. Watch. She dipped her fingers in and scooped the shards without comment, then set them on a napkin like tiny fossils. Engineers study their mistakes. Would you like to try again next time? Mason nodded solemnly, and Nathaniel felt something unhook in his chest. It was not relief yet, but the tightness eased. They whisked, they waited, they watched the bubbles rise. Selina poured a neat circle of batter. No splash. Then flicked her wrist and flipped the pancake in a clean arc. Caleb gasped. Mason clapped once. Nathaniel realized he was smiling and schooled his face to neutral. "You'll burn them," Caleb announced, testing for weakness. "I might," Selina agreed cheerfully. "If I do, we'll call it a charcoal experiment and try again." She slid a golden pancake to the plate. "Your turn." The boys each poured a misshapen oval. Selina did not correct them. She adjusted the flame lower, murmured something about heat and patience, and let them try the flip. Mason half flipped, half folded his pancake into a crescent. Selina called it a moon and crowned him chief of lunar surfaces. Caleb's pancake landed at a tilted angle and tore slightly. She declared it a comet. Nathaniel, startled, heard his own voice laugh under his breath. He could not remember the last time he had laughed in this kitchen. They ate at the island. Maple syrup, blueberries, butter softening at the edges. Nathaniel stayed standing, coffee cooling in his hands, an observer at the edge of his own home. The boys talked more than they had in weeks. Selina listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, she asked questions that had room in them. What does your rocket need to survive re-entry if you could design a mission patch? What would it look like if bravery had a sound? What would you hear before liftoff? Caleb said bravery sounded like drums. Mason said it sounded like weather. When the plates were empty. Selina rinsed them and handed the boys dry towels. "Crew cleans the ship," she said. "Commanders lead by example." She picked up a towel of her own and dried a fork. Mason hesitated. "Are you staying?" "That depends," she said, "on whether my captains accept my contract." She glanced at Nathaniel, and the owner of the hangar. Nathaniel set down his mug. "We had a nanny leave yesterday without making it past noon. Why would today be different?" Selina folded the towel, perfectly square, "Because I'm not going to fight your sons for control. I'm going to give them some, with guardrails." She turned toward the boys. "Your dad runs companies, not prisons, but a home as a team. If I stay, I will need your help to write the rules. 3 rules only, clear, fair, and enforced by all of us. Can you handle that?" Caleb's eyes brightened. "Can we make a manual a short one?" Selina said, 2 pages, big letters. Nathaniel felt the instinct to interrupt with adult caveats, then swallowed the impulse. He studied Selina instead. She had taken charge without performing authority. She had made breakfast without making a mess of dignity. There was a quiet in her that did not demand the room, and, precisely for that reason, the room listened. After breakfast, Caleb tugged Selina's sleeve. "Want to see our rocket lab, if I may," she said, glancing at Nathaniel. He gestured. "Go ahead." As they headed for the den, Mason doubled back and grabbed Nathaniel's hand. "Come see the launch pad. Dad. It has a secret elevator." Nathaniel looked down at the small hand gripping his. The pressure was warm and sure, the way it had been when the twins were toddlers and reached for him without thinking. He caught Maggie watching him. She tipped her chin toward the hallway. Go. Her eyes seemed to say, be on the launch team. He let Mason lead him. The den had become a small mission control. Cardboard tubes, foam wings, half-built structures covered the rug. Taped on the wall, a crayon poster read Flight Rules in wobbling block letters. No yelling at the engineer in the middle of a landing. No stealing parts without asking. No stepping on the moon unless you're ready for low gravity. Selena knelt beside their latest build, eyes level with the boys. She did not gush. She looked carefully. The way an adult looks at a child's art when they understand the art is also the child. What inspired this wing design? Caleb pointed to a library book splayed open, a photo of a glider with high-aspect wings. I want lift with less drag, he said, pronouncing the words like a spell. Less drag is a worthy dream, Selena murmured, and Nathaniel felt the echo. He suspected she was talking about air and childhood and weight that should not have to be carried. He remembered Vivian calling them monsters. He remembered his own fear of walking into rooms where he did not know the rules. The thought rose like tidewater. Maybe the boys had not made war because they loved chaos. Maybe they had made war because they were tired of being invaded. Selena stood and dusted her hands. Mr. Price, may I propose a 90-day trial? I will be here 6 days a week, 9 hours a day, plus 1 evening to help with bedtime. If after 90 days you feel there is no real change, I walk away clean. No drama. What do you want in return? He asked. A fair salary, she said, health benefits, and the right to ask you to be home 2 nights a week by 7, not every week, but often enough that your sons can believe a promise that repeats. Nathaniel went still. No one spoke to him like that, not since his mother, not in this tone that combined respect and non-negotiable care. Maggie exhaled a tiny yes. He looked at the twins. Mason's face was open hope. Caleb's was a brave mask that could not hide the trembling under his stubborn chin. Nathaniel's throat tightened. If he said no, he knew what came next. Another stranger, another failure. If he said yes, he would be tested in a way money could not solve. All right, he said. 90 days. Selena nodded. No victory flash, no self-congratulation, just that calm again, like steady weather. Then I have one more request. Outside time. 30 minutes a day, rain or shine. Boys, you will be my witnesses that I asked for it. Caleb saluted. Mason giggled and saluted too. Nathaniel found himself smiling for real now. You drive a hard bargain. Ms. Ward. I build bridges, she said. Sometimes bridges need guardrails. Before lunch, Mason tugged Selena's sleeve again. If you stay, can we name a rocket after you? Selena looked at both boys, then at Nathaniel, then back to the boys. Only if it's a ship that knows how to come home. The house was different by noon, and nothing enormous had changed. Pancakes and a poster, a tone of voice, a condition with a human cost. But the light falling across the den did not look cold. It looked like morning deciding to last. Nathaniel stood in the doorway and realized he was not afraid to walk into his own home. For the first time in months, he wanted to stay. The third day with Selena Ward began like a storm threatening to roll in. Nathaniel Price came down the stairs in his suit, phone pressed to his ear, barking numbers to a partner in London. The boys were already in the den, and by the time he glanced in, he saw scraps of paper snowing across the floor. A Lego tower had toppled. Caleb was shouting that Mason cheated. Mason was shouting that Caleb was unfair. Selina sat cross-legged on the rug, holding a shoebox like it was treasure. Inside was nothing more than colored pencils, rubber bands, and marbles. But she tapped the lid gently, and the boys went silent, as if she'd struck a gong. "This is a lab of disasters," she said. "Every engineer makes mistakes. Here we collect them. Every broken wing, every wobbly rocket, every drawing that didn't look right goes in here. At the end of the week, we celebrate failure." Caleb's brow shot up. "Celebrate trying," Selina corrected. "If we stop trying because we hate failing, we never build anything real." Nathaniel's voice on the phone trailed away. He ended the call without finishing his sentence. He stayed in the doorway, invisible. The twins brought their scraps forward. Mason dropped a jagged cardboard piece. Caleb shoved in his crumpled drawing. Selina placed the toppled Lego tower carefully inside. Then she closed the lid and looked at them. "Now it's not your disaster anymore. It's the lab's, and the lab doesn't shame you. It thanks you." Nathaniel had been prepared for tears or tantrums. Instead, Mason whispered, "Can we make the lab a logo by all means?" Selina said. They set to drawing: a cracked rocket, a smiling sun, a banner that read, "We tried." The boys laughed in bursts, not cruel laughter, but delighted surprise at their own creations. Nathaniel felt the smallest shift in his chest, like a window cracked open in a suffocating room. Later that afternoon, he tried working from his study, but he kept drifting to the doorway of the den. He saw Selina set up a relay race in the garden, carry water in paper cups without spilling. At first, the twins sprinted and drenched themselves. Then, Selina jogged alongside them, demonstrating steadiness. "Speed without control is waste," she said. "Control without joy is boring. You need both." They adjusted. They learned. Caleb began moving slower. Mason balanced better. They high-fived when they reached the end. Selina clapped once, enough to honor their effort, but not steal their thunder. By dinner, the boys were chattering. Nathaniel listened from the head of the long table. Fork paused mid-air. Mason told him about the lab. Caleb showed him the new logo. Nathaniel nodded, throat tight. He wanted to say something deeper, but the words jammed behind his ribs. He settled for, "That's impressive." Selina glanced at him across the table, and her eyes said they need more than impressive. They need you. That night, Nathaniel poured himself a bourbon. He stared into the amber glass, thinking of boardrooms where he had commanded respect, of investors who leaned in when he spoke. But here, in his own home, he felt like a ghost haunting the margins. He climbed the stairs quietly. At the twins' door, he heard giggles. He peeked in. Selina was reading from a book, voices changing with each character. Caleb's head lolled against her shoulder. Mason curled at her side. For a moment, Nathaniel felt a sharp stab of jealousy at her ease, at the way they trusted her so quickly. But it was not poison. It was longing. He wanted to be inside that circle, not watching from the frame. He left the door ajar, heart heavier than he admitted. The next morning, the storm finally came. The boys decided to test Selina. They dragged paint cans from the garage. They sloshed red across the patio, blue across the garden chairs. When Selina stepped outside, they shouted in triumph, "Try to clean this." They jeered. Nathaniel, rushing out with his tie loose, snapped, "What are you doing?" His voice thundered. The twins froze. For a breath, He thought they might burst into tears. Selina raised her hand. "Let me," she said. She crouched down to the boy's level, not angry, not smiling. "Do you think I don't see what this is?" Caleb blinked. "What you're building a test," Selina said softly. "You want to know if I'll quit like the others?" Mason's face trembled. "Here's the truth. I don't quit because of paint. I don't quit because of glitter. I don't quit because of spilled milk or burned pancakes. The only thing that makes me quit is if you stop trying to be better tomorrow than you were today." The boys looked at each other. The silence stretched. Finally, Mason whispered, "You mean you'll stay?" "I mean," she said, "I'll stay as long as you're brave enough to keep growing." Caleb dropped the brush. Mason's shoulders slumped in relief. Nathaniel watched, stunned. He had tried punishments, bribes, negotiations. None had worked. But Selina had spoken directly to their fear, the fear of abandonment, and answered it with commitment. By evening, the boys helped scrub the chairs. They laughed at the red streaks on their arms. Selina hummed as she rinsed the brushes. Nathaniel felt like he was witnessing something sacred. After they went to bed, he found her in the kitchen, rinsing cups. "Why didn't you get angry?" he asked. "Because anger doesn't prove strength," she replied. "Staying does." He stood there, holding the weight of that sentence. He realized he had left his sons too often. Maybe not forever, but often enough for absence to feel like betrayal. He wanted to say thank you. The words rose but tangled in his throat. He managed a nod, and Selina accepted it with the same calm she carried all day. That night, lying in bed, Nathaniel stared at the ceiling. He felt the tension inside him, the war between his empire and his home. For once, he admitted the truth he had buried. The empire might crumble without him, but the boys would break without him, and that was a cost he could not pay. The day began with sunshine spilling across the manicured lawn, a deceptive calm after a week of tentative progress. Nathaniel Price stood at his office window in Manhattan, overlooking the city, half listening to an analyst pitch while his mind wandered back to Greenwich. He kept seeing Caleb and Mason's faces at breakfast, sticky with syrup but laughing in unison, and Selina Ward's calm voice weaving order out of chaos. For the first time in months, Nathaniel had left home without the tight band of dread across his chest. Yet unease shadowed him in the boardroom. He kept his phone on the table, screen face up, against his usual rules. Somewhere inside, he expected the call, the collapse of the fragile peace. It came near noon. Maggie Lopez's voice shook. "Mr. Price, you need to come home. The boys, they're on the roof." Nathaniel didn't ask how. He didn't wait for details. He ended the meeting mid-sentence, ignored the startled looks of his executives, and ran. By the time his car screeched into the driveway, his heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He burst through the front doors. Maggie stood pale and trembling in the foyer, pointing upward. "Selina's up there with them. She told me to call you, but not the fire department yet." Nathaniel's blood turned cold. He tore up the staircase 2 steps at a time, sprinted down the hall, and shoved open the door to the twins' room. The window was wide, curtains fluttering. Beyond it, a trellis led upward to the flat portion of the roof. He climbed. His hands scraped against the wood. Heat pressed down from the sun. When he pulled himself onto the shingles, his breath caught. Caleb and Mason had built a fortress from patio chairs, tarps, and wooden planks scavenged from the shed. They stood near the edge, triumphant, waving sticks like swords, and there, not 10 feet away, was Selina kneeling low, arms steady, voice calm as a lullaby. "Commanders," she said softly, "this platform is unstable. Strong forts need strong foundations. We're testing gravity," Mason yelled, his voice cracking with the thrill of danger. "Gravity always wins," Caleb added, grinning recklessly. Nathaniel froze. Every muscle coiled with terror. One slip, one gust of wind, and his sons would fall 3 stories onto unforgiving stone. His instinct was to roar, to command them down. But Selina glanced back and caught his eye. "Don't," her look said. "Trust me." She moved closer on her knees, slow, deliberate, like an astronaut drifting in zero gravity. Her palm pressed flat to the shingles. The boys tracked her, torn between suspicion and fascination. "What if," she asked, "you built a ship instead of a fort? Ships explore, ships return. We don't have sails." Caleb shot back. She reached into her tote bag, always with her, like a magician's satchel, and pulled out 2 pillowcases. She tied them to sticks, held them high. "Sails," she declared, "but a ship needs a captain brave enough to steer it home." Mason's bravado wavered. His eyes flicked to the edge. He shifted closer to her without realizing. Caleb hesitated too, torn between pride and the pull of her steady tone. Selina leaned forward. "If you climb down with me, we'll build the ship stronger in the garden. You can even paint its flag." Mason set down his stick. Caleb scowled, but his lower lip trembled. Nathaniel couldn't take it. He crawled forward. "Caleb, Mason, come to me." Now, his voice cracked with desperation. The boys flinched. Caleb stumbled on the tarp. Mason shrieked, "For one heartbeat." Nathaniel's vision filled with the image of falling bodies. Then Selina lunged. She grabbed Mason's arm, anchored him against her shoulder, and with the other hand snatched Caleb's shirt before he tipped. Her knee scraped hard against the shingles. She winced but held steady, muscles taut with determination. "I've got you," she whispered fiercely. "You're safe. Look at me, not the ground. Look." The twins clung to her, their bravado shattered. Tears spilled hot and fast. Nathaniel scrambled the last distance and pulled all 3 into his arms, shaking so violently he could hardly breathe. For a moment, they were a tangled knot of limbs and gasps, perched too close to the edge, bound by terror and relief. Then slowly, carefully, Selina guided them backward toward the window. Nathaniel shoved them inside first, then helped Selina climb in last. Once the window slammed shut, silence crushed the room. The boys collapsed onto the rug, sobbing. Nathaniel knelt beside them, hands trembling as he touched their hair. He had no words, only the raw ache of almost losing everything. Selina sat on the floor too, breathing hard, her knee bleeding through the fabric of her dress. She didn't complain. She simply stroked Mason's back, murmuring soft reassurances. "You're safe. You're strong. Mistakes don't define you. Coming back does." Nathaniel finally found his voice. Hoarse. "Why? Why would you risk yourself like that? Because they're worth it?" she said simply. The boys cried themselves into sleep. Maggie appeared with blankets, her eyes shining. Together, they carried the twins to bed. Later, in the quiet kitchen, Nathaniel handed Selina a glass of water. His hands still shook. "You could have fallen. So could they," she replied, steady as ever. "That's why I couldn't stand back." Nathaniel studied her face, the calm, the strength, the faint shadow of pain beneath her composure. He felt a rush of something unfamiliar, deeper than gratitude, heavier than admiration. It scared him. That night, after the house settled, Nathaniel sat in the dark study with a glass of bourbon untouched beside him. He thought of all the meetings, all the deals, all the hours he had traded for power. And he thought of his sons teetering on the edge, saved not by him, but by a woman who had been in their lives only days. The shame cut deep, so did the relief. He closed his eyes and whispered into the silence, "Never again." Morning light slid across the kitchen island in a long, bright stripe, catching the edges of the boys' flight rules poster like a flag in parade. Caleb and Mason ate oatmeal with brown sugar and a little cinnamon, shoulders brushing, the ordinary closeness of brothers who had been to the brink together and come back. Nathaniel Price poured coffee and listened to the soft clink of spoons. Every sound felt dearer than it should, because silence had nearly replaced it the day before. Selina Ward stood at the sink, rinsing blueberries. A wide adhesive bandage crossed her knee beneath the hem of a simple navy dress. She moved without drama, a slight hitch when she pivoted, nothing she called attention to. When Mason asked if it hurt, she said, "It sings a little," and smiled. The boys grinned back, newly proud of their caretaker, as if she were a secret superhero they had helped discover. Maggie Lopez fussed, as Maggie always did when someone she loved had been scraped by the world. She slid a stool toward Selina. "Sit, rest, I'll finish those." Selina shook her head. "I like moving. It tells the body we're still here." Nathaniel's gaze caught on that. Still here. The words reached for a place in him that felt both tender and bruised. He cleared his throat, found steadiness in routine. "Today we make the lab of disasters official," he told the boys, "and after dinner, bedtime story. I'll read it." Caleb perked up. "The manual can be 2 pages?" "2 pages," Nathaniel said. Big letters. It landed. Selina's eyes softened, grateful without turning him into a hero. He took another sip of coffee and let the heat settle into his hands, into his chest. He had promised himself something on the study couch last night, never again. It wasn't a contract with shareholders. It was a vow with 2 8-year-old boys and the woman who had pulled them back from the drop. He intended to keep it. When breakfast ended, Maggie wiped the counters in quiet circles, waiting until the boys ran to the den. "Mr. Price," she said gently, "may we speak in the pantry? It's nothing urgent, but it is important." The pantry smelled like lemon oil and fresh bread. Maggie closed the door behind them and lowered her voice. "I have known you since you were 22 and scared to ask for a raise. I have kept your mother's recipes, and I have mended your cuffs, and I have told you hard truths when you needed them. So I will tell you another now, with love." Nathaniel braced, though her tone wasn't a warning. It was a hand on a shoulder. Selina is not a miracle that fell from the sky. She is a person with a history, and some of that history touches yours. "How I didn't place her yesterday from the stairwell," Maggie said. "But I did this morning, when she turned her head just so. Years ago, before you moved here, a block of row houses in Harlem burned. There were complications with insurance and a redevelopment scheme. The company involved was one of your father's subsidiaries. Quiet thing, buried in paperwork. But to the people living there, it wasn't quiet at all." Heat rose behind Nathaniel's eyes. That old flare of defensiveness he carried whenever his father's legacy came up like a ghost. He gripped the shelf. "Are you telling me I'm telling you, a girl lived in one of those houses. She lost more that winter than I would wish on any child. She used to read to younger kids on the stoop when the heat went out. Someone took a Polaroid once, her with a book and 3 little heads on her shoulder. Maggie breathed in, slow. There's a copy of that Polaroid in Selina's portfolio. Nathaniel saw it again, the worn photo he had glimpsed part 2, edges frayed by time and thumb. He had dismissed it as a warm credential, not a beacon pointing toward a wreck he hadn't looked at long enough. Maggie kept going, gentle but unstoppable. I don't know exactly what your father's company did or didn't do. I'm not a judge. But I do know this. Selina Ward was that girl, and she knew you when you were small. Your mother brought you one summer to your aunt's apartment near Lenox. You and that girl shared a popsicle on the stoop. You were 5 or 6. You cried when yours fell. She gave you half of hers. The pantry seemed to tilt. Nathaniel remembered a heat-sticky evening, the drip of melted juice down a wrist, a laugh that made the air easier to breathe. He hadn't seen the girl again. He hadn't known where she went. The city had swallowed the moment, and he had let it. Because that is what boys do when the world moves them along, unless someone teaches them to stay. Nathaniel pressed his palm to his eyes. The plastic of the shelf label bit his skin. Does she remember me? Ask her, Maggie said, and ask without defending what cannot be defended. Ask with the heart you used on the roof yesterday. He found Selina in the den, kneeling between the twins as they traced a rocket fin on poster board. She glanced up. Come look, Mr. Price. We solved the wobble. He watched their hands move like a small orchestra. He wanted to protect the quiet, hold it as a shield against what he needed to ask. But truth unasked doesn't stay quiet. It sinks and sours. May I speak with you a minute? He said. Selina skimmed a palm over Caleb's hair. 2 minutes. Captains. Keep working the angle. They stepped into the hallway where the sunlight from the front door laid down a pale bar across the runner. Nathaniel drew a breath. Maggie told me about Harlem, about the fire, about a Polaroid, and about a summer when we were small. Selina looked past him toward a window as if measuring the weather. When she met his eyes again, there was no accusation, just the steady honesty of a person who has buried enough and will bury no more. Yes, she said. I remember you. You cried when your popsicle fell. I split mine. Your mother thanked me like I had saved a life. I didn't. I shared a treat. The next week my building burned. My father's subsidiary was part of a chain of decisions, she said, and somewhere in that chain, people chose profit over heat and inspection. We kept blankets in the oven for warmth. We boiled water on a hot plate. We learned to pretend we weren't cold. The night the fire came, I was at church down the block. I came home to smoke and sirens and my mother sitting on the curb with a paper bag of what she could carry. The rest of our life fit in that bag for a while. Nathaniel felt the hallway narrow. I am sorry, he said. The words were small against the story, but they were true, and he put his weight behind them. I am sorry for what you lost. I am sorry for what my name meant to that winter. Selina's shoulders softened, a notch of tension leaving like air from a valve. I don't want your apology to be a defense, Mr. Price. I want it to be a door. Doors open. People pass through. He searched her face for bitterness and didn't find it. There was hurt. Yes. Braided into strength. There was memory. and there was something like resolve built out of the rubble. Why did you come here? Why take this job? Because two boys were signaling for help with fireworks, and no one was looking up, she said, and because I know how it feels to wait for an adult who does not come. She swallowed, quiet, and because I wanted, in some small way, to make right what the world didn't, not by punishing a child for a father's sins, but by keeping children from paying for ours. Nathaniel felt the words land in a place that had kept score for too long. He nodded, slow, almost a bow. Will you tell the boys any of this? Not yet, she said. They need a present that doesn't carry the weight of our past. When they ask, and they will, I'll tell them what's theirs to carry and no more. He considered that. Trust is harder when it asks you to wait. He let the pause stretch and then cut it clean. If you stay, if you can, what do you need from me? She didn't hesitate. Show up, not just when things break, but when they work. Sit on the floor, even when your knees complain. Read the story out loud, even when the meeting went bad. And when the past knocks, and it will open the door with them so they never have to open it alone. His throat tightened. I can do that, he said. I will. A car rolled over the gravel outside, tires making a soft sound like waves. The doorbell rang. Maggie crossed the foyer and went still when she saw the figure in the beveled glass. Selena's eyes flicked toward the entry and then back to Nathaniel. Your weather just changed. He knew before the door opened. Some names carry a temperature. When Maggie pulled it wide, the air went cool even though the sun still laid warm stripes across the floor. Vivian Price stepped in wearing a cream coat and sunglasses she did not remove. Her hair fell in perfect waves. She surveyed the foyer like it was a showroom she had once owned and might repossess. Hello, Nathaniel, she said, her voice sugar over ice. I heard you finally hired number 30. How quaint. I thought I'd stop by to see what we're saving the boys from this time. Selena's posture didn't change. She made herself slightly smaller, not from fear, but to keep the field clear. She glanced at Nathaniel. His jaw had already set. He felt something old climb his spine, a habit of bracing for Vivian's storms. He put a hand to it in his mind and released. We're not saving them from a nanny. Vivian, he said, even. We're saving them from abandonment. Vivian's smile sharpened. The sunglasses came off, eyes bright, dangerous. We'll see what a judge thinks. From the den, a small voice carried, Dad, is that Mom? Nathaniel looked toward the doorway, then back at Selena. She held his gaze. Bridges, her eyes said, guardrails, now. He nodded once and walked toward the den. Voice steady. Boys, come say hello to your mother. Vivian's perfume moved ahead of her like a story she wanted told. She swept into the den with the entitlement of a person who confuses presence with ownership. She reached for Mason's shoulder as if she had the right. Mason stepped back behind Selena without thinking. Vivian's hand stilled. A hairline crack ran through her smile. Selena didn't move. She didn't comfort or confront. She simply stood at the exact height of the boy's fear, a lighthouse on a rock. Nathaniel took his place beside them, not in front, not behind. He wasn't sure what the next 5 minutes would require. He only knew this the past had knocked. They had opened together. Vivian Price removed her sunglasses with a small, deliberate click and placed them on the twins' Lego control console as if it were a marble credenza. The den's soft afternoon light struck the diamond studs at her ears and scattered cold sparks across the wall. She smiled at Caleb and Mason like a person greeting fans. It did not reach her eyes. "Hello, my loves. Mommy's home." Mason's fingers tightened around the hem of Selina Ward's dress. Caleb straightened his shoulders in a brave attempt at neutrality. Lower lip caught between his teeth. Nathaniel Price stepped forward, steadying the air. "We have guests every day at Mission Control," he said lightly. "Today, we use gentle voices." Vivian turned her smile on him. "Nathaniel, you look tired. The Empire demanding its tribute." She let her gaze travel the room. "And yet, here is our tiny republic of cardboard. How darling." Selina met Vivian's glance with a simple nod. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Price." Vivian's eyes flicked over Selina. Take an inventory. The faint scrape on the nanny's knee, the careful posture, the boy's proximity to her side. She tilted her head. "So, you're number 30. They said you were different." Selina answered in the same tone she would use to narrate the weather. "I am here to keep the boys safe, to teach them to build what will hold, and to help this house feel like a home. That is my entire brief." The smallest quiver passed through Vivian's mouth. For a heartbeat, something like annoyance surfaced and then retreated behind polish. "We will see." She pulled a slim envelope from her bag and tapped it against her palm. "I did not come to discuss domestic philosophies. I came with concerns." She placed the envelope on the den table between a stack of mission drawings and the boys' flight rules poster. "I have documentation that Ms. Ward's presence poses a risk to our children and to our family's reputation." Nathaniel did not reach for the envelope. "Tell me your concern without the theater." Vivian's smile thinned. "Very well. Ms. Ward has a history with your family's businesses. A tragic story, I'm sure, told in the right rooms to harvest sympathy." She glanced at Selina. "You are very clever, but clever is not the same as safe." Her attention returned to Nathaniel. "I have statements from a private investigator, photographs, and notes indicating Ms. Ward has used proximity to children for leverage in the past." Caleb's chin lifted in anger. Mason swallowed hard. Selina did not move closer to the boys. She breathed once, slow, and looked only at Nathaniel. "Those documents are false." Vivian laughed, not loudly, but with the pure pleasure of performance. "Of course you would say that. Many scammers do." She slid the envelope toward Nathaniel with 2 fingers. "Open it." Nathaniel looked at the twins. Gentle voices echo in this room, he told them, even now. Then he took the envelope and walked toward the doorway. "Selina, would you stay with the boys while I speak with their mother in the study?" Selina gave a single nod. "Captains," she said to the twins, "you have a 10-minute window to finalize the tail fin angle. I want your best data." She made no move to follow the adults. She simply anchored the room with her presence. In the study, the door clicked shut and the world narrowed to leather, wood, and the slow tick of the clock Nathaniel's mother had loved. Vivian remained standing. She preferred the power play of height. Nathaniel opened the envelope on the desk. Inside lay glossy prints and 2 typed statements. One photo showed Selina at a church stoop, book in hand. Children tucked close. The same Polaroid he had noticed days earlier, now reproduced from some digital archive. Another showed Selina leaving a community center with a young boy clutching her hip. "There's nothing criminal here," Nathaniel said. Vivian spread her manicured hands. It is not the photo, it is the pattern. Attach yourself to vulnerable situations, earn intimacy, and step into influence. Then arrives the ask. She arched a brow. I am offering you foresight. Nathaniel. End this now. Remove her. Your sons will learn to respect boundaries again. The board will stop whispering that you have compromised judgment, and your deal on Monday will close without me lifting a finger. There it was, the second blade. What deal? Vivian. She smiled that cool smile again. Bancroft Systems, the logistics platform that will expand your warehousing footprint by 40%. I have had lunch with someone who does not want you to expand. Someone who admires my resolve as a mother and my understanding of timing. The word timing lingered like a perfume. You would tank a deal that affects thousands of employees to settle a personal score. She pretended shock. I would never. I am a mother advocating for her son's safety. I am simply letting the universe know the truth. Where it falls is not my fault. Nathaniel set the photos down as if they might stain the desk. You left, Vivian, and I came back, she snapped, the ice cracking to reveal heat, because I will not watch you replace me in my son's hearts with a stranger who is playing a long game. I know women like her. They craft vulnerability like a violin, the pressure on the bow, the tremble of the wrist, and the room weeps. Nathaniel felt the old reflex rise to argue, to manage, to charm her into reason. He let the reflex pass. He thought of 2 boys on a roof and a woman bleeding through her dress who had said, I have you. He thought of doors and the courage to open them. He thought of his vow. You may petition the court, he said evenly. You may speak to whomever you like, but you will not threaten my son's stability to negotiate your return, and you will not defame a woman in my home to test the limits of my patience. Vivian's mouth went still, then curved. You really have fallen for her trick. That makes you weak. Nathaniel, it makes you predictable. She leaned in, voice low. You are a black man invited to certain rooms as long as you never forget who built them. You have become useful. You think that makes you safe? It does not. One rumor, one stain, and those rooms will empty faster than you can say rebrand. I am protecting you from yourself. The words were a blade honed on an old grindstone. He had heard variations of that warning his entire life, sometimes dressed as advice from allies, sometimes spit as insult from enemies. Vivian wielded it with clinical precision. He looked at her and saw the entire architecture of their marriage, the calculations, the transactions dressed as love, the way she carried other people's power like a cloak and believed it made her taller. He felt a quiet enter him, the kind that precedes a firm line. Get out of my study, Vivian. She flinched, then laughed a theatrical little note as if the scene amused her. As you wish. But when the board calls after Monday, remember this conversation. She picked up her sunglasses, slipped them on, and paused at the door. Tell your nanny goodbye for me. I like to keep endings tidy. She swept out. Nathaniel stayed standing at the desk until the clock ticked twice more. Then he lifted the envelope again and felt the cheap gloss of the prints. His thumb pressed the edge hard enough to crease. He set them down and walked back to the den. Selena had the boys on the rug with a protractor between them. Mason held the base, concentrating with his tongue between his teeth. Caleb adjusted the angle with the grave focus of a surgeon. The room smelled like pencil shavings and maple syrup. Selena looked up without a single question on her face. She had given him space to lead. "Vivian will be leaving now," Nathaniel said. He knelt, a deliberate act, rubbing his palm across the rug to ground himself in this space that mattered. "Boys, your mother came to visit. She and I do not agree about a few things right now, but you do not have to choose between loving her and trusting Selena. You are allowed to love and trust the people who show up." Mason crawled into his lap. Caleb stayed where he was, eyes bright and wet but refusing to spill. Nathaniel cupped Caleb's head with his free hand and felt the tug of defenses loosening another notch. Selena exhaled a breath he almost did not hear. Then she set the protractor aside. "Captains, break for 10, water, then back to the table for draft 2. She stood and turned to Nathaniel. "May we talk?" They stepped into the hallway. Selena's voice remained low enough that the boys would hear only comfort in the room behind them. She said one sentence. "She is not finished. I know, and the deal she threatened is important. It is." He forced a wry smile. 40% important. Selena studied his face as if it were a set of coordinates. "I will not be your liability. Mr. Price, if my presence jeopardizes the boys' stability by giving your wife a lever, I will resign and stay available as a tutor off-site. I will not abandon them, but I will not be the wedge someone uses to pry apart what we are building." A flare of protectiveness burned through Nathaniel so sudden it startled him. "No," he said, more sharply than he intended. "No, you will not resign because someone brought lies to my door." He steadied. "This house has been ruled by fear long enough. We are not going to teach my sons that a threat is the same thing as the truth." Selena's eyes softened with something like relief, but she didn't step into the emotion. She stayed in the work. "Then we will need a plan." Maggie appeared at the archway, a phone in her hand and determination set in her jaw. "I have one piece of it. I called an old friend this morning after I saw that envelope. We met at a church basement during a food drive in '98. She writes for a paper that still cares about facts. If Vivian is feeding your rival a story, we feed the truth to daylight first, but only with your say." Nathaniel looked from Maggie to Selena and felt it again. The thing he had kept confusing with luck. It was not luck. It was the harvest of women who refused to quit when the weather turned. It was a net. "Do it," he said, "but carefully. No public spectacle that drags the boys. Facts only." Maggie nodded and vanished down the hall, already composing lines in her head. Nathaniel returned to the den and sat on the floor, knees complaining, shoulders easing as Mason climbed back into the space beside him. Caleb slid the mission sketch across the rug. "Dad, do we pick the angle or does the angle pick us?" Nathaniel smiled. "The best ones are chosen together." They spent the next half hour drawing wings. Selena corrected nothing essential. She adjusted a pencil here, the lighting there, a breath at just the right beat. When the timer chimed, she sent the boys to wash up and stayed on the rug, looking at the poster of flight rules. He sat beside her. "Thank you," he said quietly, for not retreating when she arrived. Selena's mouth tipped into a half smile. "I don't retreat from weather. I adjust the sails." Evening fell across the estate in layers. The boys ate grilled cheese and tomato soup at the kitchen island. Legs swinging, laughter returning in small brave notes. Nathaniel answered 2 restrained calls from board members and 1 from his general counsel, who hinted at rumblings in the market and asked whether everything was stable at home. "It is," Nathaniel said, and for once he meant it not as a PR line, but as a promise he intended to keep. Near bedtime, a notification pinged on Maggie's phone. She met Nathaniel in the pantry. Her voice stayed calm, but the words were a match struck in a dry room. "Vivian met with Bancroft's deputy last week. There is a recording, not hers, the deputy's assistant. He was uncomfortable with the pitch. He wants to talk." Nathaniel felt the old rush of adrenaline that had once been reserved for hostile takeovers and midnight rescues of failing divisions. He set his jaw. "Tomorrow morning, here, I will be home." He climbed the stairs and paused at the twins' doorway. Selena was reading. Caleb leaned against her shoulder. Mason was half asleep, one hand on the blanket edge like a man holding a rope that led him back to shore. Nathaniel stood there and let the sight rewire something that success had scrambled. He thought of what Vivian had said in the study, the old insult polished into a warning. He thought of the rooms he had entered and the whispers he had outlasted. He thought of the simple arithmetic of love and presence that had nothing to do with those rooms at all. He stepped inside and sat on the floor at the foot of the bed. Selena lowered the book, surprised, then welcomed him with a glance. He cleared his throat. "May I read the last page?" Selena handed him the book. He read slowly, each word a bridge back to the part of himself that had learned story before he learned strategy. When he finished, he closed the cover and rested his palm on the quilt. "We are building a ship," he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "It knows how to come home." Morning arrived with a thin veil of fog resting over the lawn like breath on glass. The house woke quietly, no slamming doors, no battle cries, only the clink of cereal bowls and the soft squeak of sneakers along the hall. Nathaniel Price brewed coffee strong enough to steady a bridge. He had decided last night to be home, fully home, and he wore that decision like a well-fitted jacket. Maggie Lopez set out a plate of toast triangles and murmured, "Our visitor will be here in 10. He sounded nervous on the phone, but resolved. Selena Ward nodded once, a pilot checking weather. Then we make the room safe. She lined up 3 glasses of water on the island and moved the boys' art off the dining table to the sideboard. She did not ask for control. She made space for truth. Caleb and Mason padded in, hair still rumpled from sleep. "Who's coming?" Mason asked. "A man who wants to tell the truth," Nathaniel said. He wrapped the line in calm. And we always listen to that, even when it's hard. Caleb watched his father for a long second, as if testing the seam of a promise. Then he nodded and reached for an apple slice. The doorbell chimed. Nathaniel walked to the foyer and opened the door to a man in his late 20s, holding a slim satchel like a life preserver. He had the skittish energy of someone who had slept poorly and told the mirror, "Today you're brave. Mr. Price, I'm Aaron Willis, assistant to the deputy at Bancroft Systems. Come in." "Aaron." Aaron entered, eyes catching for half a heartbeat on the chandelier, then drifting toward the sound of water in the kitchen. When he saw Selena and the boys, he straightened his posture, as if remembering he was speaking into a home, not a boardroom. Nathaniel guided him to the dining table. Maggie placed the water within reach and retreated to the kitchen, where she could see but not crowd. Selena stood with the boys at the threshold between rooms, a quiet border that said, "This far and no further." Nathaniel gestured to a chair. "You said you had something to share." Aaron wet his lips. Last week I scheduled a private lunch for Ms. Vivian Price and my boss Bancroft's deputy chief of strategy. The meeting wasn't on the public calendar. It took place at a club where the staff know how to look past certain conversations. He swallowed. She presented information about Ms. Ward and suggested Bancroft reconsider the timeline on your deal. She implied delays might be useful, given domestic instability at your firm. Nathaniel kept his face still. Can you prove this? Aaron nodded quickly. The club's service system logs private rooms. I requested the check under my account to avoid a record hitting the main office. I also recorded the conversation on my phone. The assistant's voice shook, then steadied. I did that because I was ashamed to be there. I didn't like what it meant, so I made a record to keep myself honest. He slid his phone onto the table and pressed play. Vivian's voice filled the room, measured, silky, a blade wrapped in velvet. He's compromised, she was saying. He's placed a nanny. Selena Ward is the name at the center of his household. She carries a sad story that plays well online. She has his sons. If you stretch the diligence phase and let certain rumors breathe, your board will get what it wants. He will withdraw, or he will bleed equity for speed. Either way, Bancroft wins. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a single beat. Distantly, he heard Caleb whisper, "Dad." He opened his eyes again. Aaron stopped the recording. There's more, but it's enough to make it clear. Maggie, steady as stone, brought a legal pad and pen, names, dates, the server's first name, the room number, any details you can recall, she said softly. Facts build the road, Aaron wrote, the way a person signs a confession of conscience rather than guilt. When he finished, he looked at Nathaniel. I'm not doing this for your company. I'm doing it because my grandmother raised me to tell the truth to the person it hurts to hear it. She said that's the only truth that matters. He glanced toward the twins. And because I don't want to teach boys in this room that power always wins. Nathaniel's voice came low, sincere. Thank you. Selena stepped forward just enough that Aaron could see her clearly. Thank you, she echoed, for risking your own weather. Aaron stood. I'll email the file. Use it how you need. Then he hesitated, breath catching. Ms. Ward, what she said in that room about you, it made me angry. He looked at Nathaniel. I've watched men in suits dismiss the lives on paper. It felt like that. He squared his shoulders as if a weight had shifted off. I don't want to be that man, not even by accident. You're not, Selena said. Not today. When the door closed behind Aaron, the house held a full breath. Then Mason tugged Nathaniel's sleeve. Dad, does this mean Mom was... He fumbled. The word bad hung unsaid between love and defense. It means, Nathaniel said carefully, that your mom made a choice that hurt people. She can make other choices later. We can, too. Caleb folded his arms. We choose Selena. Selena's eyes glistened, but she didn't step into the center of the moment. She tilted her head toward the kitchen. We also choose breakfast. Bravery needs fuel. The next hours moved like a train gaining speed in open country. Nathaniel called general counsel. The lawyer listened to the recording at Nathaniel's desk and said, in a voice stripped of theater, We proceed to the board. We document. We do not posture. He reached for his phone. I'm calling Bancroft's chair. If they want a deal, they won't want this stink on the floor. Maggie texted her journalist friend a simple line, "I have verifiable audio concerning a corporate attempt to tank a family-run merger via domestic defamation." The reply came in 3 words, "I'm listening." 15 minutes later. The reporter sat in the kitchen. No cameras. No mic. Just a notebook and the professionalism of a person who still believed in the craft. She listened twice. Then she closed the book and said, "On-record quotes or background." Nathaniel said quickly, eyes flicking to the hall where the twins built a paper cockpit. "This is not a spectacle. It's daylight." Selina remained at the den arch, listening with her whole posture. When the reporter asked if the nanny wanted to comment, Selina shook her head. "Not yet. When this is over, you can write about 2 boys who learned their father shows up. That's the story." The reporter's eyes warmed. She wrote that down as a future. By early afternoon, the first counter call arrived from Bancroft's chair. Voice tight and formal. "Mr. Price, we have been made aware of inappropriate contact between your former spouse and one of our deputies. We are conducting an internal review. We intend to proceed with diligence on schedule. We also intend to apologize. Make the apology go to my employees," Nathaniel said, "and to the assistant who had more integrity than your deputy." The chair exhaled slowly. Noted. The second call was from Vivian. It came in as Nathaniel stood by the window watching the boys test a paper glider. He let it ring twice before answering. Vivian began without preface. "That recording will not prove what you think. It proves enough," he said. "You are going to choose a stranger over the mother of your children." Her voice was already sharpening, the threat coiling like rope. "I'm choosing truth over manipulation, and a home over fear." He kept his tone quiet. "You can do the same, Vivian. You can apologize to them. You can be different tomorrow than you were yesterday." Silence, then a bitter laugh. "You always loved a redemption arc." She hung up. He stood there a moment longer, letting the deadline be what it was. Then he turned to see Caleb and Mason marching into the kitchen with a poster lifted between them like a standard. It read in large, careful letters, "Rule 1, tell the truth. Even when it rains. Rule 2, ask for help. Even when you think you can fly. Rule 3, we come home." Selina looked from the poster to Nathaniel, and for once the steadiness in her gaze flickered. She pressed her palm to the counter and drew a breath that trembled at the edges. "I like your rules," Nathaniel said. His voice felt both stronger and more breakable. "They're better than the ones in most boardrooms." "Can we make you sign them?" Mason asked. "Like a treaty." Nathaniel took the marker and signed, then handed it to Selina. She wrote her name small and neat beneath his. Caleb printed his with bold lines. Mason added his in loops so wide the M spilled into the border. Maggie signed last and kissed the top of each twin's head. Near dusk, the reporter texted Maggie a link to a short piece that read, like a weather report, "Bancroft confirms review after improper outreach regarding third-party family matter. Deal timeline unchanged. No family names, no photographs, just facts." It landed like a steadying hand. The markets did not flinch. Nathaniel's board did not panic. One member even wrote a line that surprised him. "Proud of how this is being handled. Bring the boys to the company picnic." He walked out to the garden where Selina had the twins measuring string for a new kite. The air smelled like cut grass and sun-warmed rope. He watched Selina show the boys how to tie a bowline with calm instructions and patient fingers. When she noticed him, she lifted the string for him to hold. "Keep this taut. We're learning tension and trust." He took the line. The kite frame rose, trembled, then steadied. The sky kept its pale blue like a promise still unfolding. Caleb tested the tail weight. Mason held the spine and grinned. "This is going to fly," he said. "It will," Nathaniel said, "because we built it together." As evening wrapped the yard in gold, they sent the kite up on a trial run just 20 feet, then 30, then 40. The line sang in Nathaniel's hands. He felt the pull and gave enough to let the kite climb, then tightened to keep it true. Selena stood beside him, one palm ready on the line in case of sudden gusts, eyes on an angle in the sky. "Dad." Mason called, "Don't let go." "I won't," Nathaniel said. He meant the kite. He meant the boys. He meant the life they were stitching with string and rule and truth. They reeled it in as the first porch lights blinked on down the lane. Back inside, the twins ate spaghetti, tired, happy, eyes bright with the small victory of flight. At bedtime. Nathaniel read while Selena listened, and for once no part of his mind wandered to term sheets or talking points. He was here. The story had his full attention after the boys slept. He and Selena stood at the landing outside their door. The house breathed its old steady rhythm again, but something within it had changed. Air moved easier. Voices felt freer. "Thank you for staying steady today," he said. "Thank you for choosing daylight," she replied. He glanced toward the closed door. They made a rule about coming home. Selena's mouth curved. "Then our job is to live it until it stops being a rule and starts being normal." Nathaniel nodded. In the quiet, a thought he would not have allowed a week ago rose and settled without demanding shape. It did not need a name. It only needed a chance. The night after the kite rose into the sky, sleep did not come easily for Nathaniel Price. He lay awake in the dark, the house hushed around him, and listened to the faint creak of branches against the windows. The day had brought light. Yes, but light always casts shadows. He could feel them pressing at the edges, Vivian's threats. The boys' unspoken questions. The way his chest tightened whenever Selena Ward's eyes met his too long. In another wing, Selena sat cross-legged on her bed, a journal open on her lap. The pages were half filled with neat lines that curved into reflection. She wrote to steady herself, to keep from drifting into memories that clawed at the edges of peace. You cannot fix the past, but you can build something better for someone else. It was the line she returned to when sleep threatened to drag her into the fire again. Morning came with a sudden knock. Maggie Lopez opened Nathaniel's study door without ceremony, holding a folded newspaper. Front page of the business section. They printed the Bancroft story, facts only. But Vivian's name appears. Nathaniel took the paper. The headline read, "Bancroft reviews internal conduct after improper outreach by former spouse of Price Global CEO." There were no details about the boys, no mention of Selena, but Vivian's name was in bold ink for anyone to see. He folded the paper and set it aside, his hands curled into fists on the desk. This is going to make her desperate. She was already desperate. Maggie said, now she'll be reckless. Nathaniel nodded grimly. He knew what that meant. He needed to prepare not just for his company, but for his sons. Later that day, while the boys tinkered with their rocket project. Selena lingered near the window. She saw Nathaniel approach and straighten his tie, only to loosen it again like the fabric was strangling him. Something inside her ached at the sight. She stepped forward. "You've been holding the world on your shoulders since I walked in this house," she said quietly, "but you don't have to keep carrying it alone." He laughed under his breath, a humorless sound. "That's what they've always expected of me. Hold it up, smile while I do it, never stumble." His eyes lifted to hers, raw for once, not shielded. "Do you know what it costs to be invited into those rooms? Selena, to stay there, you walk in as a guest, and they measure every word, every gesture, every time your children are in the news. You walk out of line once and the door closes for good." Selena's voice stayed soft but firm. "And how long can you live in rooms that demand you leave yourself at the door?" Nathaniel's chest rose and fell. A storm caught under ribs. He looked away, toward the sound of the twins' laughter drifting from the kitchen. "I can't let them pay the price for my past or my failures." Selena stepped closer. "They don't need you to be perfect, Nathaniel. They need you to be present. They need to know their father can admit when he's afraid, when he's tired, when he's fighting ghosts. That's what will make them strong, not your silence." Her words pierced something he had buried for decades. His father's face flashed in memory hard, distant. A man who believed showing fear was a weakness, not realizing that withholding tenderness could wound deeper than poverty ever did. Nathaniel pressed his palm against the desk, grounding himself. "Do you think I can give them that?" he asked, the question bare as a wound. Selena's eyes softened. "You already are. Every time you kneel on the rug, every time you read a page out loud, every time you say the truth, even when it hurts, you're teaching them. The question isn't whether you can. The question is whether you'll allow yourself to believe it." The silence stretched between them, thick with truths too fragile to name. Nathaniel wanted to step closer, to reach for the steadiness in her presence. But a knock at the door shattered the moment. Maggie appeared, her expression urgent. Vivian's attorney just filed for temporary custody, emergency motion, hearing in 3 days. Nathaniel's stomach tightened. On what grounds? Maggie hesitated, then placed the folder on his desk. "She claims the nanny is unfit, that you've endangered the boys by leaving them in her care." Selena went still, her breath catching in her chest. The words burned with cruel familiarity. She had fought whispers like these before, in courts and shelters, from people who looked at her skin, her scars, her history, and assumed danger. Nathaniel saw the flicker of pain on her face. "It's a lie," he said, too fast, too sharp, as if the speed could erase the harm. "It won't stand in court, but the boys will hear it," Selena said, voice low. "They'll hear their mother say it, and that wound will last longer than any trial." Nathaniel leaned forward, his hands gripping the desk as if he could crush the problem into submission. "Then we fight. We don't run. We don't concede. We fight with facts, with witnesses, with every ounce of truth we have." He looked at her, steady now. "Selena, you saved their lives. You've given them rules that mean more than any board vote I've ever won. I will not let Vivian destroy that." The certainty in his tone shook something loose in Selena. She nodded slowly, though her hands trembled at her sides. "Then we fight." That evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Nathaniel found himself outside on the terrace. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the trees. Selena stepped out quietly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars burn above them. "Do you ever wonder if life can give second chances?" Nathaniel asked, almost to the night itself. Selena's eyes followed a falling star across the horizon. "Not wonder, believe. Because I've had to. After the fire, after losing everything I had, to believe there was another beginning. Or I wouldn't have survived. The question isn't whether second chances exist, Nathaniel. It's whether we're brave enough to take them." He turned to her. The distance between them charged. Alive. "And are you brave enough?" Selena's breath trembled. "I am. But this isn't about me. It's about you choosing not to be your father's son anymore. It's about you choosing to be the father your boys need." The words sank deep. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the tide inside. When he opened them, he let the storm show, just for her. "Then help me be that man." Selena held his gaze, unflinching. "I already am." The night pressed close, heavy with everything they had not yet said. Somewhere upstairs, the boys stirred in their sleep. The sound anchored Nathaniel to the truth the real battle had only just begun. The days that followed blurred into a haze of preparation and quiet dread. Papers stacked high in Nathaniel Price's study, legal briefs waiting like weapons to be unsheathed. Calls with attorneys stretched late into the night, his deep voice steady on the phone while his heart churned in secret. Caleb and Mason could feel the tension thickening in the air, like a storm pressing against the windows. But in the spaces between, life pulsed stubbornly forward. Selena Ward insisted the twins still had mornings of math, afternoons of reading, and evenings of stories. Routine is their anchor, she told Nathaniel firmly. If everything else shakes, they need one thing that doesn't. He could not argue. The sound of the boys reciting multiplication tables filled the halls, and, for a moment, it almost drowned out the ticking clock toward the custody hearing. On a cool afternoon, Nathaniel returned from the office early. He paused in the foyer, listening. The faint hum of laughter drifted from the dining room. He followed it quietly. Inside, Caleb and Mason were bent over construction paper, their little hands smudged with glue and markers. Selena knelt between them, her shawl draped over her shoulders. She guided Mason's fingers as he carefully cut out stars. Caleb's voice rang bright. "This one is for Dad." "It has to be the biggest star." Nathaniel leaned against the doorframe, struck by the picture before him. His sons, who only weeks ago had driven away 29 nannies with pranks and chaos, were focused, joyful, making something with their hands, and at the center of it all was Selena, steady as a lighthouse. When she finally noticed him, her lips curved. "You're early." He nodded, throat tight. "I didn't want to miss this." Caleb darted over, holding up a paper star glittering with too much gold dust. "Look, Dad, we're making our own constellation." Nathaniel crouched down, taking the star carefully. The glue dampened his fingers, but he didn't care. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Mason glanced up shyly, then leaned against his father's knee. The bond between them was mending in ways he hadn't dared to hope. And Nathaniel knew it wasn't his doing. It was hers. That night, when the boys had gone to bed, Nathaniel found Selena sitting by the window in the library. The glow from the lamp haloed her profile. She didn't turn when he entered, but her voice carried softly. "They trust you, you know, more than they trust anyone." He stepped closer, lowering himself into the chair opposite. "No, they trust you. You gave them back what I couldn't." Her eyes lifted, meeting his steadily. "I gave them structure, but you gave them love. Nathaniel, even if you didn't know how to show it, that's what they cling to. They know you'd burn the world down before you'd let anyone hurt them." The words cracked something inside him. For years, he had lived by rules of survival in boardrooms, in contracts, in cold negotiations. But here was a truth no deal could buy. He was more than his business, more than the weight of expectations. He was a father, and he was terrified of failing again. "Selina," he began, his voice faltering, "if the court believes Vivian, if they take the boys—" "They won't," she said, fierce enough to cut through his fear, "because truth has a way of standing when lies collapse." She leaned forward, her eyes bright. "And because you're not fighting alone this time." The quiet between them swelled, charged with words neither dared to speak. Nathaniel's chest tightened. He wanted to thank her, but the word felt too small. He wanted to promise something larger, but promises had broken before. So instead, he let the silence carry what his heart could not voice. 2 nights before the hearing, Selina set up a surprise in the garden. Nathaniel followed the sound of excited giggles, only to find Caleb and Mason darting around lanterns strung between the trees. A tent stood at the center, glowing softly from within. Paper stars hung from branches, swaying in the night breeze. "Welcome to our fortress of light," Mason declared proudly. Selina stood behind them, a smile flickering at her lips. "They wanted to show you what hope looks like." Nathaniel's throat closed. He stepped forward, letting the boys pull him into their creation. They sat on blankets, lanterns glowing around them, and for the first time in months, he felt the mansion breathe like a home. "Dad," Caleb said suddenly, voice serious, "if we have to go to court, will they make us leave?" The question cut sharp. Nathaniel looked at his son's wide eyes, then at Selina, who gave the faintest nod of encouragement. "No," he said firmly, pulling them close. "You belong with me. You belong here. And with Lena," Mason added, clinging to Selina's hand. The innocence of his words hit Nathaniel like a hammer. The boys saw her not as a caretaker passing through, but as something more, someone permanent, someone theirs. He looked at Selina, and in her eyes he saw both fear and fierce devotion. When the boys finally drifted to sleep inside the tent, Nathaniel lingered with Selina under the stars. The air hummed with crickets, the lanterns flickering. "They already see you as part of this family," he said quietly. Selina hesitated, her voice trembling when it came. "And what do you see, Nathaniel?" He reached out, taking her hand gently. "I see the woman who saved my sons, the woman who gave them back their laughter, the woman who's teaching me how to be the father they need." For a moment, time held still. Selina's breath caught, her heart warring between caution and longing. Then she squeezed his hand, her voice a whisper. "Then let's fight for them, together." The bond was no longer fragile. It was forged in fire, in risk, in nights under lantern light. Whatever the court decided, whatever Vivian schemed, this truth would not break. They had found each other in the ruins. Dawn of the hearing day arrived blue and brittle. The world felt thin, as if a careless breath could tear it. Nathaniel Price stood at the kitchen island in a navy suit, tie knotted clean, palms flat on the cool stone. Coffee steamed beside him, untouched. Across from him, Selina Ward packed the twins' backpacks with quiet purpose. Water bottles, a book each, a small pouch of colored pencils, familiar things in an unfamiliar day. Maggie Lopez slid a plate of toast to the boys. Caleb ate in quick bites, jaw set. Mason turned his toast into little moons and lined them at the edge of his plate. The house did not chatter. It breathed. "We go together," Nathaniel said. "We tell the truth. We do not speak badly of anyone in front of you." He glanced at Selina and Maggie. "We keep the room safe." It was not a speech. It was a prayer built of choices. The courthouse in Stamford smelled of waxed floors and old fear. In the family division waiting room, chairs faced a muted television that scrolled weather. Rain later. Selina studied the map briefly and tucked the forecast away like a sailor noting wind. Vivian Price arrived with a lawyer in a charcoal suit and a smile sharp enough to cut. She wore white. She always wore white to hearings, as if clean cloth could cleanse intent. Vivian did not look at the boys. She looked at Nathaniel as if he were a headline she planned to edit. Her attorney whispered and laid a hand on her elbow, the gesture of someone holding a dog that strains at the leash. The clerk called the case. They filed in. The courtroom was smaller than television promised, its wood-paneled walls making a close kind of silence. The judge, a woman with silver at her temples and a gaze that missed little, read the file. She looked up at the people instead of the paper. "Ms. Price," the judge began, "you have requested emergency temporary custody on the grounds that the children's father has endangered them by leaving them in the care of an unfit caregiver. What evidence do you bring?" Vivian's attorney launched into a paragraph about prudence and propriety. He placed a folder on the lectern. He said phrases that had no children in them. When he finished, Vivian spoke in a voice of practiced concern. "I have been deeply worried by the instability in my sons' lives. I have reason to believe Ms. Ward has a pattern of attaching herself to families in distress." She hesitated, a theatrical beat, and she has a history with the Price family's businesses that compromises her motives. Nathaniel felt Selina's stillness beside him. He kept his breathing slow. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Price. Your response." Nathaniel stood. He did not clear his throat. He did not perform. "Your Honor, I am a father who has failed at being present more times than I deserve, and I am trying to change that. Ms. Ward is a certified caregiver in good standing. She saved my sons from a dangerous situation on our roof 2 weeks ago. She has brought routine where there was chaos. She has never asked for anything but the chance to help." He paused. "As to motives, I can only offer this. When my former spouse attempted to influence a corporate counterparty with defamation, an assistant recorded the conversation. He has submitted that recording to counsel. The court has a copy." A short current moved through the gallery. Vivian stiffened. Her attorney adjusted his glasses as if they had fogged. The judge lifted a brow. "I have reviewed the recording. It does not flatter Ms. Price." She turned to Selina. "Ms. Ward, do you wish to speak?" Selina rose. "Yes, Your Honor." She kept her hands light on the lectern, as if it were a piano in a quiet room. "I cannot fix the past that links my life to the Price name. What I can do is show up for 2 boys who needed steady weather. I have no claim to them beyond the work of each day. I do not want a headline. I want them to feel safe enough to sleep." The judge studied her for a long second and then looked at the twins. "Boys, Would you like to tell me one thing about your days lately? Caleb lifted his chin. We have flight rules, he said. He recited them slowly, careful with each word. Tell the truth even when it rains. Ask for help even when you think you can fly. We come home, Mason added. We made a kite. Dad did not let go. A silence fell that was not empty. It was full. The judge tapped her pen once on the bench. Ms. Price, the emergency petition is denied. A temporary order will be entered maintaining the current caregiving arrangement. The court expects both parents to encourage the children's trust in the people who care for them. Should either party attempt to weaponize rumor in a corporate or public forum to influence these proceedings, sanctions will follow. She softened a degree and addressed the twins. You have good rules. Keep them. Vivian's mouth tightened. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered a sentence that sounded like, "Not today." Outside the courtroom, the boys deflated with relief. Caleb grabbed Nathaniel's hand. Mason wrapped both arms around Selena's waist and pressed his face to her coat. Maggie stood a step back and let the moment be theirs. Vivian approached, eyes bright with the kind of brightness that comes when a person refuses the truth a judge has spoken. She aimed her smile at the boys. I will see you next week, darlings. Mason edged closer to Selena. Caleb's gaze did not waver. Okay, Mom, he said. His voice was even. We want you to keep our rules too. Vivian's smile thinned to a line. She pivoted and vanished into the corridor's noise. They drove home through a fine mist that silvered the hedges. Near the driveway, Selena said softly, "Rain later. Lanterns tonight." The boys snapped awake as if a fan had turned on inside their chests. At dusk, Maggie and the twins hung glass lanterns from the maple limbs, one by one, until the yard glowed like a constellation discovered at ground level. The air smelled of rope, damp bark, and dinner cooling on the kitchen counter. Nathaniel carried a basket of tea lights while Selena tied lengths of ribbon to the lowest branches so the littlest hands could feel included. Dad, Caleb said, can we invite the neighbors? And the man from Bancroft who told the truth. Aaron, Nathaniel said. Yes. Call him, Maggie offered, already tapping her phone. And I will text our favorite reporter, no cameras, just hot cocoa. People arrived in ones and twos. A couple from 3 houses down came with a thermos and a plate of brownies. Aaron Willis walked up the drive in a thrift store coat and an expression that kept realizing it had come to a celebration without warning. He stopped under the lanterns and looked up. Wow, he said to no one and to everyone. It looks like the sky came down to hear us better. Selena pressed a mug into his hands. Thank you for your weather last week. He nodded, face pinking in the lantern light. I slept better after. My grandmother would have liked this. The reporter came last and handed Selena a small wrapped parcel. For the boys to open later, she said. It is only paper and string. But paper and string have done a lot of good in this house. Nathaniel watched the yard fill with gentle noise. He thought of boardrooms lit by cold LEDs and wondered how he had ever mistaken those rooms for the center of his life. He found himself beside Selena at the tree where the first lantern hung. The glow painted her face with soft gold. She looked up, then down at him, and for once neither of them stepped away from the gravity between them. Thank you for standing with me today, he said. Thank you for letting truth do the heavy lifting, she answered. Maggie clapped for attention. Before Coco, a moment. She tipped her head toward the twins. Your captains have an announcement. Caleb and Mason climbed onto the low stone bench that had become their stage. Mason held a poster. Caleb spoke. "We made a new mission patch," he said. "It is for our family." He turned the poster. A simple emblem filled the page: a small house, a kite, 3 stars clustered above the roof, and in the lower corner, a 4th star with a tiny heart in its center. "That is you," Mason said, pointing at the heart star. "Lane." Selena's hand rose to her mouth. The yard quieted the way people do when they do not want to disturb a fragile thing. Nathaniel looked from the emblem to the woman who had become their weather, their rules, their calm sail. He did not make a speech. He did not ask the crowd to witness a declaration. He stepped to the boys and knelt. "Is this our patch?" he asked. "Yes," they said together. "Then we wear it," he said, "all of us." As cocoa steamed and paper cups warmed cold hands, neighbors tied slips of ribbon to a wishing line Maggie had strung between 2 stakes. "Write 1 wish or 1 rule," she instructed. "We will raise them with the lanterns. No wish too small, no rule too kind." Aaron wrote, "Tell the truth to the person it hurts to hear it." The reporter wrote, "Keep the story human." A woman from the next block wrote, "Let your kids see you make a mistake and fix it." Maggie wrote, "Feed people before you argue." Selena took the marker last. She stood with the ribbon in her hand and looked toward the house. Then she wrote, "Come home, even when you're scared." She tied it at child height. Nathaniel struck a long match. The boys each took one and lit the first wave of tea lights. Lantern by lantern, the garden brightened. A light wind moved through the maple, and the glass chimed faintly. If you listened, it sounded like a chorus of tiny bells, when everything glowed. Nathaniel lifted his face and took the new weather into his lungs. He turned to the people gathered there, to the 2 boys who had taught him to stop pretending not to need what he needed, to the woman who had taught him to name it. He felt a line in him settle. He knew what mattered and what did not. "Time for the lift," Selena said, voice smiling. She and Nathaniel walked to the table where a paper lantern waited, painted by the boys with stars and a kite and their mission patch. The twins gripped the thin rim. Nathaniel held the fuel cell for Selena to light. Warmth bloomed, the lantern swelled. "What is our rule?" Mason whispered. "We come home," Nathaniel said, "together." They released the lantern. It rose with a soft, determined grace, right in the faint updraft above the maple. Other lanterns followed, one by one, city fireflies climbing. People craned their necks. Someone laughed through tears. Aaron wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve and did not apologize. The lanterns drifted higher, turned to small suns, then to points, then to a suggestion of light. The last one paused in the breath between wind and stillness, and for a moment it looked like it might come back down. Nathaniel felt the boys tense on either side of him. He squeezed their shoulders. "Wait," he said. The lantern lifted again and kept climbing until it joined the others in a scatter of careful stars. They stood there a long time, heads tipped back, breath misting, listening to the quiet garden that looked like a sky brought near. When at last it grew cold enough for noses to pink and fingers to ache, they went inside. In the foyer, under the mirror that had seen more sorrow than it should, the boys taped their mission patch. Maggie took a photo on the old instant camera she used when she felt like a moment deserved paper more than pixels. She shook the picture and handed it to Nathaniel. "Not for a frame," she said, "for your wallet. He slid it in behind his driver's license where only he would see it every day. The image was a little blurry, the way moments of joy often are. It was perfect. At bedtime, Nathaniel read while Selena listened, and when he closed the book, the house did not feel fragile. It felt simply alive. The rules on the poster no longer read like instructions for survival. They read like how a family breathes in the hallway after good nights. Nathaniel and Selena paused at the landing where the light from a single lamp warmed the wall. He turned to her. "Thank you for bringing the sky down where we could hold it." She touched his sleeve, a gesture both brave and careful. "Thank you for letting it rise." They did not name the future. They did not need to. It would come the way good weather comes on the other side of a front. Not all at once. But you know it when you step outside and the air is kinder. The house settled. The lanterns outside flickered lower. Nathaniel stood at the window for a minute more and watched the last small lights soften into night. He thought of the judge saying, "Keep your rules." He thought of the boys saying, "Leany." He thought of work and how it would call tomorrow with all its noise. And he thought of the simple refusal that was now built into his days. He turned from the glass and went to sleep in a home that kept its own weather. A home that knew how to come back to itself. A home that would not let go. At its heart, this story reminds us that love is less about grand gestures and more about daily presence. Nathaniel had power, prestige, and all the resources in the world. But what his children longed for was not another mansion or a new toy. It was his attention, his time, his steady hand. Selena's quiet strength revealed that healing begins with small, consistent acts, reading a bedtime story, guiding a child through fear, standing firm in moments of trial. For older viewers, the lesson deepens. It tells us it's never too late to repair what feels broken. Whether with children, grandchildren, or old friends, showing up with honesty and humility can create bonds stronger than any material wealth. It also challenges us to confront our own defenses. The walls we build in the name of survival can keep out not only pain, but also love. In a world full of noise, this story calls us back to simplicity. Tell the truth, ask for help, and come home even when it feels hard. These are not just rules for Nathaniel's family. They are rules for living a life that leaves others better than we found them. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your heart with us in this story. If Nathaniel's journey moved you, or if you saw a piece of your own life in his struggle, we invite you to stay connected. Please like this video, share it with someone who might need its message, and subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss the next story. Together, let's keep building a community where stories heal, inspire, and remind us we're not alone.